All right, YouTube world, this is your guy. I'm not a Lions fan, but I am here with another video, and I'm going to talk about a few things, and mainly I'm going to talk about I may get around to talk about what's going on off the field with the Lions and so forth, but it's two particular subjects that I really want to address. One is about, of course, Stafford, and the other one is about Matt Patricia. I look at both of them as like they're like the missing element of the other of the other half. So it's like if Stafford was like incomplete, then I believe Patricia is the completion to Stafford. And if Patricia was incomplete, I believe Stafford is the completion to Patricia. All right. In a prior video, I talked about the infamous invisible wall, and there's an invisible wall. It's like a mental block that towers over the Lions organization. It's like for every reason they can get past it, whether if that's self infliction or that's the help from the outside, you know, officiating and so forth, and how all that nonsense may be. And what I mean by this invisible wall is somehow reason it's like players that come here that is considered maybe like all world talent somehow they don't reach that stature, of all world. We only had in my time of watching the Lions organization, I only seen two players that have been that will be considered, that the Hall of Famer type deal, and that is Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. Everybody else, it's like they never reached their full potential. It's like they hit this invisible wall. And now that's from the player's perspective, but even with it even goes across the board towards coaches. You bring in winning coaches, and for whatever reason they can't get past this wall. It's somehow they could have been successful somewhere else, but they come here and they drop, or they leave here and they can gain a success again. So it's like an invisible wall. I call it a mental invisible wall. It's like I don't know. I can't even describe it. But I bring that up to say, since Quinn and Patricia got here, I would say mainly Quinn. I've seen players that he have brought in here go through that mental wall and actually get better. And I'm talking about Lions standard of better. What I mean by Lions standard, they have a ceiling, average ceiling, and to a lot of fans here, they may consider that ceiling high. I just don't consider it a high standard. Let's say, for example, if I were to talk on the subject of Stafford, I often say that Stafford is a tale of two sides of a coin. There's the beginning Stafford where he's like really pretty reckless, and when I say that Stafford is a different guy in this regard. He is more poised now. Before he was a gunslinger, he would just throw it up. It's like John Elway. John Elway, when he first came in the league, he was like this gunslinger. Just throw it. Now, don't get me wrong. He made a lot of plays. He did some things, and he was using his feet and so forth, and he was considered making his stamp in the league as a quarterback. He wasn't a bust or anything like that, so he was making himself. But he didn't establish himself until the game started to slow down, where he wasn't as reckless. Now you're talking about when, of course, you could talk about the years he had a rushing attack and everything else. But John Elway had went to the Super Bowl several times, but couldn't get across it. You could say that the organization didn't give him the help that he needed, so forth. But I ultimately believe that John Elway had to get out of his own way. He had to mature, and so by the time that Terrell Davis in the run game came, John Elway was mature enough. He couldn't be the guy that he once was when he first came to the league. This is why I think about the same thing with Stafford. when where Stafford is at now, and you could tell the game has been slowing down. He's using his head and versus his ability with his arm. Now, some fans may say like, well, he has so many comebacks. He has the most comebacks in history, or he threw for 5,000 yards, or the the fake spike play, or but that's not his career. Those are moments of that he have shown that. But have you noticed for the last past 3 years he have been showing more a consistent um, tape full of that, where he's constantly that, consistently that. Versus early on in his career, he wasn't really that. It's like it mattered, but it didn't matter. It didn't sink in matter. And I often use him getting married, you know, and marriage doesn't do this for everybody, but for some people it does. It's like having a children or something like that. It slows you down. It like life like makes sense. Or no disrespect to anybody who have been in an unfortunate situation with their health. It kind of like some it kind of slows down life, and you look at everything like in slow motion. You can see all the little things. You can see how to dot the I's and cross the T's. You can see where you missed it. You can see where you can get it better, and you evolve. It's like the ripening of the fruit to be plucked, and it's like you just matured. This is what I say the difference of Stafford is. Okay, let's say for example, there was a time that he was doing a drive. The Lions was driving down the field and they was trying to put six on the board, and I don't know who the team they was going against, but they was driving. They was making a mark down the field, and he had threw a pass to Eric Ebron, and the plan is to stop the clock, right? You get your I don't think they had any more timeouts. If so, they were trying to reserve their timeouts, and he was ushering Eric Ebron after he caught the ball to get out of bounds. But Ebron was staying in bounds, as Stafford gave him like this look, and I'm saying like, where was that? And on record, you would hear players like Nate Burleson or maybe a few others. I don't know who it was. They may say like they want Stafford to take control. And then they will go on to say that he became more evolved after Calvin left. So if I'm not if I'm incorrect, forgive me. I believe he was here before Calvin was here, or he was here after Calvin. I believe he was here before Calvin. I believe. I'm not sure how that works. But either which way it go, the Stafford that make that type of play wasn't the Stafford through his whole career. And the icing on the cake of Stafford maturity, of course, I would say maturity, is that when his wife went through her situation, and like I said, it and for so some people, terrifying situation, it slows down everything. I'm a guy who had a stroke, and in my case, it was fairly severe. Now, don't get me wrong; they didn't have to do surgery or whatnot, such as Stafford's wife, but it's still nonetheless it's the effect of the brain, where you lose. Well, I lost sight, I lost mobility, I lost comprehension. I just lost. I learned had to learn. Don't want to say you come like a child again, but had to relearn everything. And so, but in the course of all that, like the 3 years of my life, it just changed everything. Up to that point, you kind of take everything up for granted. Up for granted. You kind of take things for granted because you're invincible because you've never been hurt before. You've never been in that kind of like that. I want to call it a sense of being mortality. You haven't been up to that point. You've been immortal because you never had to face any obstacle like that. Everybody else around you may have, but you never directly experienced that. And so I believe that what Stafford was going through with his wife and seeing her, it did something to him. Like his, don't get me wrong, you got the plays that he running over linebackers and all that good stuff, and or his arm is out of socket and he's throwing the ball. I don't consider that leadership. I call that reckless. I people think that's heroic. I don't consider that heroic. That's a rah rah guy. I'm looking for him to use his IQ, like that can cost Stafford his career. You know what I mean? So that's not much of a leader. I look at guys like Joe Montana, for example. Joe Montana to me was like he's like the greatest quarterback in history. And I say this for one reason because I just believe no matter what situation Joe Montana is in, he'll come out on top. Don't get me wrong, the Leonard Marshall hit and everything else that derailed a lot of stuff. And then, of course, when Steve Young came to the 49ers, they had to make a decision to go young or, uh, no pun intended, or stay with the old guy. And they chose to go young and they let go of Montana. Montana went to Kansas City and Kansas City bit them back. Montana had his revenge on the 49ers. But anyway, what I'm saying is Montana, like he from the very start when he came into the league, when he first came into I guess to the 49ers and whatnot, he was like this guy that nobody really, cared about pretty much, but he earned his stripes. But he was poised. He was just calm. And you on the record you hear Jerry Rice talk about it and a few others talk about how, you know, he you just knew that he was going to do something. See, Stafford is the guy that like I said, he's a tale of two sides of a coin. He is that guy that you can count on that will take you down the winning drive. But he's also was the guy that will hold on the ball too long and get a sack. Or instead of throwing the ball out of bounds, he get hit and he coughs up the ball or he throws the interception. He's a tale of two different quarterbacks. And for like I said, for the in the prior video, the last two, I said three. I want to say from Cardwell. Don't get me wrong. Jim Schwartz and all the Mike Martz and Jim Balcudas and all that. Everybody played a part into his maturity. Don't get me wrong, but I started to see the change when Cardwell got a hold of him. It's like he slowed the game down for him. Like all the other coaches before that really didn't develop him. He was just basically on his own, making it stick. He was figuring it out on his own. And I look at Patricia the self same way. Don't get me wrong, he could call a lot of coaches and everything else, and particularly he could call Bill Belichick and ask him for some advice and everything else. But I think when he first got to the Lions, it's one thing to be known as a defensive coordinator or being good at what you do, and it's another thing to be known to be up under someone who is great at what they do. And so, excuse me, he was up under Bill Belichick, and he is known for being great for what he does. So he had to get up under that shadow, and he had approached it, in a way that it was kind of immature or undeveloped. Making a stamp like you're gonna do it my way. Now, when you're on your own, you're gonna make your mistakes. You know what I mean? This is his first go around as being on his own. Now, being a defensive coordinator is one thing, but being a head coach in a totally now, I say if he was a head coach in New England, then it would be a different coming out the gate, Matt Patricia, because everything else is already established. The upper management, the cap, and everything else. You don't have to familiarize yourself. You don't have to put things in place. Everything is already together based upon what Bill Belichick and those with him, what they done. Here, nothing was in place. Now, the only thing that this organization had when he got here that you can basically count on to be dependable was Stafford. And once again, even with that Stafford was very incomplete. Even when he had, I think when he had Reggie Bush, the offense was pretty good. With Burleson and Calvin, I think the offense was pretty good. Even okay, you could say Java best for the little stint that he had. It was good. I mean, I don't think he has to have the best talent to be Stafford. When Calvin went away, he took two guys that was considered undeveloped or wasn't really didn't have a household name, such as Calvin Johnson, and they developed something. You got Marvin Jones and you got Golden Tate. They developed something. So he can develop a player, but it just I don't know. Some players, I guess they have to be on the same page for that to actually that magic for that to actually to coexist and for that to really develop. But I'm not hammering on Stafford at all. I am pointing out this thing that he Stafford. The people say like Stafford has been great since he's been here. It's hard for me to see it because I saw greatness periodically. Like going back to the Ebron play, he tell Ebron to get out of bounds because they don't have any timeouts and he's trying to save time on the clock. That was one stint. There are several different opportunities for him to do that, and where did it go? So I think now, like for the last past 3 years, instead of Stafford making statements like that periodically, I think he's very more consistent with it, and that's why I called it a tale of two Staffords. And why I think it's good for him to have Patricia because I think Patricia needs Stafford as well as I believe that Stafford needs Patricia. A person may say like I disagree with that. Stafford can succeed, go anywhere, succeed. No, if that's the case, if that was the case, he would have succeeded up on a Carwell. He would have succeeded up under Jim Schwartz. Now I don't agree with that. He had talent around him to be successful. He had talent around here to take us to the next level. A person may say that he didn't have a run game, he didn't have this. I look at Dan Marino and John Elway. All right, and both of them. All right, and I'm not talking about the John Elway that won the Super Bowl. I'm going to talk about the John Elway that didn't win the Super Bowl, and I'm going to talk about the Dan Marino that got to the Super Bowl but then never get back there. All right, my question is, name me their tight end and their running back. So that's normally be the case for Stafford. He didn't have a tight end. He never had a running back in the running game. So for either one of those coaches, I mean, either one of those quarterbacks. Now I'm not talking about John Elway with Terrell Davis. I'm talking about John Elway when he went to the Super Bowl and he lost. And those first, I think he went to the Super Bowl twice and he lost. And I could be correct. I could stand corrected during the time that Cincinnati was going and so forth. And this is the '80s, of course. Who was his running game? What was his running game? He didn't get a running game till what Bobby Humphrey got there, and even that was short lived. He didn't get a good receiver until what Anthony Miller got there. And Anthony Miller, I believe he came from the Chargers, I believe. I don't think I think he had a guy named Mark Jackson, um, and it was another receiver he had over there uh, with Elway. But he will name his tight end. You could say Shannon Sharp, but that came later on. You know what I mean? That didn't come when he was losing the Super Bowl. I was then somebody could say he had a good coach. Like, okay, Dan Reeves was a good coach. Okay, all right, okay. If you want to I give you that. Okay, he got him to the Super Bowl, so he must have did something right. So, but the answer, to go back to the question, give me his tight end and give me his running game. He didn't have one, so it was off of him that they won. And the players they had a good defense. Steve Atwater and so forth, a few others. They had enough to get them there. I think the Lions it was in the exact same position, even with up under Jim Schwartz and Jim Carwell. They was in the same position. They had good years with them where they got to the playoffs. I don't think Stafford was mature. He wasn't evolved in himself yet to take them over to the next page. Now you put the Stafford now with them then. You put the Stafford right now with the Jim Cardwell and the Schwartz, Jim Schwartz, and they will get past the first. They would get past that. They wouldn't lose those playoff games. I'm willing to guarantee you that. It's a totally different Stafford. Stafford game has evolved, and not so much on the field. And that's what players, I mean, fans may look at it like, well, his statistics is the same, and he's still throwing lights out with the touchdowns. And but look at this, look at this. When Jim Caldwell got here, his touchdown interception ratio changed from when it was up under Jim Schwartz. So somebody may say, well, the coordinator was different. I'm like, okay, I think he had this up under Schwartz. He had what, Linehan and Mike Martz, I believe. Okay, get it done. You know, and up under Schwartz, you have Jim Barcuda, which the fans harp on that he was a bad coordinator, but he's getting it done with him. I'm just saying Stafford wasn't in a position that he look what he's doing. He's more involved. Now somebody could say him having children. Once again, look what I'm saying. He got married. He didn't have any children before he got married. So he's his life is rounding off. Like the rough edges is being shaved. And same thing with Staff. I mean, if I were to switch it over to Patricia, Patricia was coming out. He's trying to come out the shadow of being up under Bill Belichick. That is like being one of the Jackson Fives, being up under Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? You gotta. I mean, how many of them came out of the shadow? Jermaine Jackson tried. You know, I mean, he made an attempt. He almost got out, but you could say Janet, but Janet got out. All right, so if you talk about the Bill Belichick tree, a lot of them came out that got the head coaching job from being a coordinator or assistant or whatever. But how many of them have got up under the shadow of Bill Belichick? So this is what Matt Patricia is developing. Now, when he first got here, people say he was raw. But I would say it was definitely necessary for a culture that has an invisible wall. That visible wall consists of 8-8, or maybe one year you go 12-4, or another year you go 11-5, or something like that, or whatever. You do something, you overachieve, but it's not consistent. It doesn't sustain itself. So, yeah, I really don't count it as like a winning culture. One year is up, next year is down, but then somebody may say Jim Caldwell, each year they got better. Okay, all right, yeah, but they still can get over the hump. If he had more time, maybe he could have. If Jim Caldwell was in the position that Matt Patricia was in, then maybe so. Up under Caldwell, he was what they was cash strapped, where they couldn't do anything because they was tied with the Staffords, the Sues, and the Calvin Johnson type contracts. They wasn't the financial flexibility they didn't have. So maybe Caldwell could have done something if he had more assets to play with. But and then you go the same thing with you say the same thing with Swartz. Same thing with Caldwell could say with Swartz. If they had the capital to be able to do stuff, then maybe they could have made the team even better. But going back to Patricia, he is a guy he is getting out of his. People say he's getting out of his own way, but he didn't have a way to begin with. He's coming from up under arguably one of the greatest coaches that ever coached in the NFL. So at least uh, with the winning record, according, my guy is still Bill Walsh. Is the greatest coach, but you go down the line with Parcells and so forth, and there's a lot of them. But Patricia is making his way out of the. When he first got here, he has nothing to work with. I'm not talking about the team. I'm talking about the organization. He has there is nothing developed here. And if somebody could say that Jim Caldwell developed it, but then you could say Jim Schwartz developed it versus Caldwell. Jim Schwartz developed that. He got us from out up under the shadows of Mayhew, and of course Mayhew got him up under out of the shadows of Millen. Mayhew brought him here, and he actually was successful. Up under Mayhew. They just Mayhew wasn't Quinn. And once again, this is what gives Quinn and Patricia the leg up because they have learnt up under a culture, not just drafting players and developing players. They have learned how to develop a culture. I'm like an organization from uh, from equipment managers to trainers to nutritionists to everything to those who handle the financial situations, those who handle the market, all that stuff they learned up under a winning organization for over 20 something years. Who so uh, making my point with Patricia, that why he needs Stafford because Stafford, I don't think Patricia could win without Stafford. And what I mean by that is Patricia could have a lights out defense this year. I mean, I'm banking on Jamie Collins, Trey Flowers, Danny Shelton, Trufant, Jeff Okuda, Harmon, Tracy Walker. I'm banking on that. To John, forgive me, Jelani Tavai. I'm banking on that core to be like lights out. Everybody else is like a bonus to me. But I'm banking on that core to make that defense at the being ranked from one of the last ranked defenses to being one of the top ranked defenses. I'm banking on that core. They will evolve the rest of the defense. That core. So um, even with that being said, I don't think Stafford. I mean, I don't think Patricia could win without Stafford, and because they make each other better. They're like what Stafford his can I say stigma has been or his stamp that maybe against him is that he don't have the pieces. He don't have the run game, nor have he ever had a tight end, a legit tight end. Pettigrew was decent, but I don't. That's going to my point that I don't think a player actually until Quinn and Patricia got here. I don't think a player actually went through that mental wall. Remember that mental wall is like an invisible wall that you really don't have to succeed here. And let's say because the standard here of success wasn't really that high. The last time they had success was what in '91. You're one game away from going for the Super Bowl. That's the last success you had. And you could talk about that 12-4 or 11-3 or 13-3. I mean 13-3 or 12. Talk about those type of things, whatever. But they haven't won a playoff game since '91. That's the only success you ever had. So there's not really much of a standard. So a player that can get you 80 receptions and maybe 1,000 yards, we could like, oh, they're a world beater. But they didn't do anything. I mean, they really didn't do anything. Like, in all what Golden Tate did here, it's considered average any place else. I like those some numbers. I like that's numbers here on a losing team. What did he do when he left? What did he do before he got here? They said that's Stafford. I'm like, oh, that's a losing organization. When you all they got, then you can't help but to show out. But then somebody said like, well, he had Calvin Johnson to bounce stuff off. But if you doubling Calvin, you open. You do what you do. And he got his bread and he ate it. I mean, I'm not faulting Golden Tate for nothing like that. I'm just putting it in the perspective that in the midst of all that he is, whatever, he's okay. Glover Quinn, okay. Diggs, they're okay. They're not all pro. You know what I'm saying? Darius Slay is okay. They're not all pro. A person may say that Darius Slay is all pro. To me, he's not an all pro. He may be a pro bowler, and that to me that's by default. There's not no cornerbacks in the league. I'm sorry, there's none. The league is totally different. It's in a different. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, I Stafford and Patricia, they need each other to get over this hump, to get through this mental wall. Can Patricia win with David Blau? Definitely, definitely. But I don't think David Blau will get the best out of Patricia. Because I think what's inside Stafford makes Patricia better as a coach. And I think what's in Patricia makes Stafford better as a player. It's like accountability type deal. I'm not trying to say that Schwartz or Caldwell didn't have that. What I think they was Schwartz. I think he was over his head when he got here, and I think Jim Schwartz was what Stafford needed to get the ball rolling because up until he got to Caldwell, Stafford was being groomed up under mediocrity. Let's call a spade a spade. With that, Stafford was learning on the fly, like how to be a quarterback, how not to just play street ball, how to actually play with your head. If you are close to 40 years old and you're still trying to run through linebackers, it's like big as a house, and something's not right. Then we would, as a fan, we would say, "Oh, he's a rah rah guy." Yeah, but he's going to cost you. He's going to cost you everything, especially particularly if he's your franchise quarterback and he's doing stunts like that. He's reckless. That's equivalent to T.J. Hawkinson hurtling over somebody and landing on his head. It's equivalent. It's the same thing, but you give T.J. Hawkinson a better shot of recovering because he's younger, even though he landed on his head. But you give him a better shot. But Stafford, he's at the age that he is, and he's trying to run through people. We don't need you to do that. We need you to slide. He's still learning the difference between street ball, where I'm a reckless, I'm going to be a wrecking ball, run through this wall, versus being, hey, I'm going to live to fight another day. I mean, and I think he's in a battle with that. But Patricia is doing the same thing. Patricia's like he's in a two-way street, and people say that he's changed from last year to year. He's trying to come out of this huge shadow. It's like Steve Young trying to come out of the shadow of Joe Montana. It's huge. Steve Young, as good as Steve Young was, until he got the Super Bowl wins, particularly until he was able to beat Dallas, because Dallas was the champions for 2 years, and they knocked off the 49ers 2 years straight to get to the Super Bowl. So until he was able to beat the Cowboys, and particularly until he was able to get to the Super Bowl, possibly win it, he was always going to be in the shadow of Joe Montana. The same thing with Bill Belichick and any other assistant that comes out of Bill Belichick. Until they actually win, they're going to be up under his shadow as only as good as being his assistant. And so I think Patricia was trying to do his very best to establish himself early on to make himself known. And you rub it against something that you're rubbing up against mediocrity here. Now you got some players that was like, I'm with you. Let's go run in the snow. Let's go run up the hill. Let's go do the gassers. Let's do all this stuff. You got some guys that is in this corner, right? But their talent may not be good. Their talent may not be good as their paycheck. Their paycheck was maybe they pay too much to get them here because you got to overpay the players, even if they are mediocre, or even if they